Well, welcome everyone. This is Daniel. He is, well, just tell them all about yourself, Daniel. We met over the internet, and he's doing some cool stuff we want to talk about. So, what are you up to?
Well, we met over the activist spaces of trying to, promote really education and like make sure that people really understand what it means and how important some of these amazing issues that you're covering are. Like I've just found the whole introduction to your world really important to me, as it like really it helped me bring a lot of the issues that I was dealing with every day within activism, and speaking about them in bite-sized chunks was really, really helpful. And that's what kind of brought me to contact you originally. So I want to thank you for that
Oh, well, thank you. Very kind.
sincerely.
Very
Yeah,
kind.
I think it's really important to do that. But I'm a lot of things, but currently we're here talking about photojournalism and what I've been covering in New York and what people have been seeing from all over the world and what's going on here, whether it be something in the activist spaces from the Mandami campaign, obviously, which I've covered him now for 5 years, and all the way to very specific issues of housing, which he's dealing with on a daily basis, including the last few days and the first few days of his administration, as well as we can talk about some of the other things that I'm involved with, which have been documentary film and currently working on a new art book that will deal, at least in concept and in the underlying meaning and artistic statement, I guess, of it as an anti-Zionist Jew and what that means within the art context.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, and obviously, I'll do the plug for you. Is like he also contacted me. He's doing a Kickstarter for this book, and so we always do plugs at the beginning and end. And so, if y'all want to check out the book that we will talk about later, I'll link it in this Substack post and in the show notes. I looked at some of the stuff; looks really cool, and we always need good based art in this world. It's an undervalued thing in especially white Western circles, and so if you want to go check it out, go do that. But you let's start out by talking about the Mamdani campaign, your photojournalism with Mamdani. You said you've been doing it for the past 5 years. What has he been? He's been on the some board. I don't live in New York. Prior to that, what
he's,
is
he's
I? What has he been doing? He's been a board member. I don't know. Yeah, yeah.
no.
Why did you take an interest early on? That's so interesting.
Well, he's actually been an assembly member. So in
Assembly
the
member.
state in state government, so there's a state assembly and there's state senators in our state. So that's what the two branches are, if you will. And so he was an assembly member for Queens. And I first ran into him, though I didn't know it was him. I looked back on some of my photos in my archive and I said, "Oh, there's some housing actions and there's Zohran. Oh, okay,
Hmm.
cool." But this was after the fact. I didn't actually know his name at that point. When I took the photos, I didn't know his name. Afterwards, I was looking for photos with him, and I was like, "Oh, he was there," and so I got
Yeah.
to see some archived work. But my original um, knowledge of him came during the 2021 taxi driver medallion debt crisis that was gripping taxi drivers here in New York. Now, the simple explanation of this, because it can be very complicated, is that taxi drivers here in New York, legendary of course, really got sabotaged by city government when Lyft and Uber, surprise, came in. So in
Yeah.
essence, there was a new deal cut for Lyft and Uber, which allowed for those ride sharing applications, which have now taken over, to come in and basically compete with yellow cabs.
Yeah.
And the problem with that was that, in essence, to get a yellow cab license, you had to buy a medallion, and the medallions were $1 million a piece, if you can believe this. So who in there? I mean, can you imagine trying to pay off $1 million loan, in essence, to just to drive? That doesn't even include like actually making money for your family. So like, but this was what it had come to, and it was a terrible world where the city basically just kept jacking up the prices and keeping the number of medallions low, so the prices were high for these
Yeah.
things, and it just really became untenable for most drivers. And after what ended up happening was that most of these drivers had huge loans. Of course, sound familiar with some of the other things you're dealing with? Huge
Yeah.
loans, education, medical, all these things that we're
They
talking
want us
about. Like,
poor and dumb. It's fantastic. So yeah.
it it's just continual, like, okay, who's getting rich off of this, you know? And so what was happening was these drivers hear the competition. The city has actually sabotaged their own means of income and their own means of how to pay off the medallion just to get to work. And so it was just absolutely a crazy situation. And so anyway, I heard about that there was, you know, a real movement going on within the taxi drivers to take it to City Hall. This was during Bill de Blasio's time in City Hall, and he did some good things and he did some crappy things, and you know, a lot like a lot of politicians. And in the end, who knows how I feel about him? It's half and half. He did some very important things, and he finally did try and take care of this. This wasn't up to him, this debt consolidation crisis, but cutting to the chase, what ended up happening was that I heard that there was a consistent protest going on at City Hall by taxi drivers, and they were being very vigorous about it, shutting down the Manhattan Bridge with, you know, they were doing things. And it was like, oh, well, you know, let's go find out some more about this. I mean, that's a lot about photojournalism is not necessarily knowing what's going on. It's like actually trying to figure out what the story is. And so I was just curious, and I wasn't assigned it by anyone necessarily. I'm just a curious sort, and I like people, and I like to help people if I can, and if I can tell their stories a little bit, great.
Damn right. That's the best way to be. That's what I try.
So
I
went down.
I don't know. So yeah, you just showed up. This is why I want to go to big cities. You can just show up and do shit. That's awesome. So yeah.
I mean, it's half the. I mean, for you, it would be. I mean, easy content. You know, not that I'm pushing
literally.
This, but
yeah.
I mean, it's like you're there and it's happening, and there's 20 of these things happening a day, so it's definitely possible. And anyway, so I went down there, and on the, I don't remember if it was the second or third day that I went down there, because they were going down there very regularly to get this done. Here's a little press conferences going on, and very few press were there. And you know, I'm a no-name press, but I was there, and I was videotaping. And here's this assemblyman that's going to come up and talk. Oh, okay, cool. So I'm listening to him and taping, and he's announcing a hunger strike for this debt consolidation of the taxi drivers. And I'm like, you know, I mean, honestly, you know, I'm sure I'm a lot older than you, and I have in my decades, I have not ever been in proximity of a politician that has actually physically put themselves on the line to say, I am going to hunger strike. This was like, I'm listening to this and I'm like, this is blowing my mind. Like, is this real? And I was really impressed by it, and I was really impressed by him. My video is of my little comp video is up on my Instagram. It's Daniel Efram at Instagram. But it's up there, and you know, you could see it. I mean, he obviously wasn't quite as smooth as he is now, but he was very, very, very confident and very, very, very smart. And it just seemed like the humanity was oozing from him.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that you still see now. And that was what was, you know, so exciting about seeing him win. And again, we'll see what ends up happening. And I'm as cynical as anyone can be about any politician.
Oh, well, yeah, that's the name of the game in this page. Is we can't win. Everything's horrible. I released a post, you know, real Wills Talks fans will know that I released a post the day after Zohran won, titled, Zohran fucking won, what's next?
Exactly.
But you know what? We can recognize, like, loquacious people that speak well, and that's what we learn from evil and good people how to speak, and there's just something human about that guy. He just knows how to relate. Did you see during his inauguration, someone said it's been 6 or 7 years, and then he did like a kind of silent giggle. And I don't support the 6-7 meme. Do you know this? Like I'm principally against the 6-7 meme. But that is just human to go for like a brain rot meme in there. It's very, very funny. Well, I mean, on housing, I just went to the it's not doxing myself, but it's I went to the West Side's Tenants Conference on the Upper West Side in New York, which is where allegedly, I don't know, Zohran announced his candidacy last year. which was incredible. It was a bunch of housing advocates like centering housing, from like housing. It's a bit different structure in New York, obviously, given how old the tenants organizing is in New York. But some tenants union-esque things organizing together and being directly intertwined with the electoral politics. That is unheard of, and that is incredible. And yeah, as you were following Zohran's, did you interact with this type of system as well?
Well, I mean, my interactions with him after that, I think are important. But I do want to. I was lucky enough to be at the inauguration, and I covered it and took perhaps my favorite photo of him and his wife at the very end that you should check out. Anyway, just you should check it out. I hope maybe other people will check it out too. But it was the inauguration itself. Speaking to that was, I've seen a few of these, not inaugurations, but I've been to big, campaign stops from him and from Bernie and from other people, and I've been doing this, so I've seen these things before. But this is the first inauguration that I've been at, and it was really special. Mainly because the city hall probably contained the main audience contained. I'm going to guess around 2,500 people. I'm just saying that it could be 2,000, could be 3,000, but somewhere in that range. And so there's about 2,500 people seated in front, I'd say, and then there's a bunch of photographers and so forth and
Sure.
media and so forth. But like, so there's a good crowd. They're all people that are huge fans or helped with the campaign. There's probably 30 people on stage. Bernie and Mayor Adams was up there as well, which is really fun. And Chuck Schumer was there, which is interesting. Like hiding in the corner was Chuck Schumer, which was also very funny. Like he didn't. It's the first time I've ever seen Schumer show up at anything and not say a word.
Yeah, well, he
Mayor,
got fecklessly little. He's a feckless little cuck. So he showed his true colors. He's not pretending anymore. He didn't. He never endorsed Zohran, did he?
No,
What little
no.
useless
And not only that,
resource.
he was, but as a funny picture, it's like him sitting next to almost like one person between him and Mayor Adams, who's sitting next to Bill de Blasio. That's like the
Oh
line.
God.
And it was just like a funny thing. As a New Yorker, it's a funny thing to see, like, okay, like all these hated people. I mean, I think, again, Bill de Blasio is less hated on a number of levels, but
Well, it's hard
whatever.
to beat Eric
Interesting.
Adams. It's
Yeah,
difficult to
interesting.
reach Eric Adams' level of being hated. But every New York mayor apparently tries. Yeah. That's
Well,
kind of the bit,
but
isn't it?
I hope not in this case, but for sure that's what that historically you'd be correct about that. I think Dinkins tried really hard too, and he was really sabotaged by the NYPD, much like most of the mayors are. Whether they're good or not, they're sabotaged by them. So anyway, that's a different story. But the point what I wanted to say about the inauguration really, and I got sidetracked, was that what was beautiful. There was many beautiful moments, but I think overall the most beautiful moment was there was probably, I gotta believe that there was, I can easily say there were hundreds of keffiyehs being worn in the audience. And that was just a really beautiful thing, because after 2 years of, people being beaten and arrested and everything else, villainized, phobia laden, practices being launched against people, it was pretty awesome to see the proud feeling of people with keffiyehs in the audience, of immigrants, mostly immigrant, brown and black and mixed cultural audience. Like it was like, that was powerful stuff. And
Well, I think I agree with how like cynical leftists are, myself included, and how much I don't trust Mamdani. My opinions on social democracy are very public. What is significant, and this is how I always talk about it with I think people would slur them as tankies, but like whatever. To be tanky is to be free. But how I talk about them is that he's a symptom of something different, right? He himself is not going to change many things, but he is a symptom of a tolerance for a particular type of rhetoric and a cultural shift. And that's what we're seeing, is the keffiyeh was viewed by many people as a symbol of terror in America, disgustingly and Islamophobically. And now it is a symbol amongst much of the left, even the lib, useless little shit left, of a symbol of freedom and fight and resistance. And that matters, right? And the reason we know it matters is because there's $1 billion industry changing that or working against that. And so that's beautiful, and I'm very pleased with that. And also with New York, the amount of diversity and diaspora that's there, the fact that they were mobilized and showed up is really, really really important and powerful, in the same way that in the South we leverage the minorities that are in the South as a core fundamental part of our politics with the freedom schools and whatnot. So that I really love to see. Everyone has their reservations about Mamdani, rightly so, but it is gorgeous. I think what you know, and what I think the best work that I've seen from you is highlighting like the very clear juxtaposition in New York of being the center of the empire and then all of the citizens of the empire being represented there. Right, the citizens of the empire being broad, not just the contiguous United States, but the very diverse places that we've bombed and imperialized, etc., that have returned to us. It is gorgeous. So yeah.
You know, it's a privilege to be able to throw, you know, to be in this space, and to, though I do have, as you've heard, some very strong opinions as well, very much aligned with what you're talking about, maybe not 100%, but definitely very close.
What is it?
Who could
If
be
we agree on
100%?
eight out of if we
Yeah.
agree on
Yeah.
8 out of 10, we could work together. If we agree on 10 out of 10, you should be in a psych ward. I think that's the
Yes.
phrase. Yeah.
I think he actually might have used that too. It was, but one of the things that I found interesting, another thing I found interesting, I wasn't, in a way, I wasn't able to do it because I was at the main, I was at the main stage, if you will. But there was actually many watching stations. They closed off Broadway below City Hall, and so they had jumbotrons up. I don't know I meant to look up, but I had to imagine that there had to have been 20,000 people that were watching this live on jumbotrons in the freezing cold. Again, I don't know the number, but it seemed like there were a lot of people that were contacting me afterwards. They were like, we tried to go, but we were turned away. It was too packed. And they showed me the pen, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, it was a very big thing. And one of the funnier things that you may have also seen is that Curtis Sliwa went to the overflow pen. That's what he had RSVP'd for.
What
people were taking photos with him. What an interesting, an interesting guy, don't appreciate a lot about him, but there's an interesting part of it that's very human of him.
Yeah,
that
he's a deeply human evil person. We're very used to I think Eric Adams, what the things that's most lovable at Eric Adams is how human he is. But then what actually ekes me out about Eric Adams is how evil he is. That's also what we liked about George Santos, right? Is he was just a freak. Right? If you're going to be evil, don't be like a Peter Thiel type of inhuman, allegedly wants your son's blood type of evil that is just weird, oh my goodness. Be a very human type of evil with Curtis Sliwa, who's just going to say wild shit. I do love that. I think as a person who spends too much time online, I probably get too I'm desensitized to evil shit, right? I'm always going to be well, it's not as evil as what we did in Iraq, which is true. And so I can always be I just need any amount of joy. And boy, did Curtis Sliwa do that. That's joyous.
Yeah.
That's where he belongs, in the overflow pin of his opponent winning. That's exactly where he belongs. It's fantastic.
The only thing I could have wished for is to have been there just for a moment to catch that, and if he had brought maybe 3 of his 17 cats or something like that, that would have been pretty.
That would have been gorgeous. But they would have been on a weird leash. That's beautiful.
That would have been cool, but you can only dream.
You can. Yeah. Well, so we've gotten through the Zoromania. And I think that's good. I wanted to ask you is, with being in the real homeland of the Jews, New York City, obviously, New York was promised to Jewish people 3,000 years ago, guys. That is true.
I've read that. Yeah.
That's what I've read. It's written down, and thus it's true. But being there, right, and you're an anti-Zionist Jew, I come from a place that's also quite Jewish. I'm not Jewish. Charlotte is disproportionately Jewish. And so I grew up in and around Jewish communities, and I know that shit is difficult, especially when you're politically charged, if you're anti-Zionist. And so especially with your with the art that you do, how does that tie in? What does that actually look like? Because I've heard all the frankly, as is the stereotype, the bitching and moaning, which is well deserved, right? And I know the analysis where I'm Zionism's not Judaism, but is there a more poetic engagement with that, or what does that look like for you? Yeah,
I think art is just such a broad a broad topic. It's tough to, pigeonhole anything about art. That's why I don't think necessarily like I don't have a statement that's of more concise nature there. What I will say is that, you know, my story is probably not unusual. In terms of, I grew up Zionist. My parents were Zionists. And I had, when I was growing up, I remember having a little blue change container, a little coin container on near our dinner table where we'd put our spare change, and that was to be donated to, I think to buy and support trees being planted. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And and I was like, wow, that is really awesome. We're planting trees, and this quarter that I have extra is going to help that.
Yeah.
And to fast forward and to find out that like pretty much almost every one of these tropes is a complete lie is like strikingly hard to accept and very, very, very divisive, as we've seen. Obviously, I'm not saying anything new there. It's just it's an interesting thing I guess my art needs to be done because I feel it, and it just so happens that I am also anti-Zionist, and I truly feel this way. And it's also an odd thing because I don't know that I would past 2 years ago, though I was in being informed about what's going on, I don't know that without the craziness, the reactions, and the freedom, the freedom of the press being thrown into the garbage, and Mahmoud Khalil, and like I don't know that I would be as vehemently talking about this as much. I was informed. I've been informed. I've been gradually getting further, and for the last 15 years, I've been or more than that, 20 years, I've been educating myself and being startled every time. And here we have this situation where like you have to make a stand, and you have to make a stand, and even though you make a stand, people die. And it's like, it's just fucking crazy. So I guess I made it. I don't concentrate on it when I am making photos that I feel are artistic. But there are times that photos that I make, and I have an upcoming show that will illustrate this, that there are times that I make photos that will obviously show my politic. And in this case, so as an example, obviously we're doing this, we're recording something right now, and I don't have something handy to show you. But what I will say is that I covered a lot of pro-Palestinian protests, as so many absolutely phenomenal photographers did. And a lot of people don't even see their work past that day of that protest, which is a shame, because these people put their heart, and this is what they have. This is what they have to give. This is what I have to give. And I want to show in a different way if I can. Yes, there's always a shot of an amazing sign and someone being emotional, and those are important shots. And I have those shots, and those are very meaningful to me, and they should be meaningful to other people. And I hope they are, not because they're my shot, but because of who they represent. I think a lot of people take great shots, and there's a lot of huge emotion out there, as you'd expect. So there are some great moments to capture this that I would hope would have an impact. But as we've learned, the media shuts out most of the independent world when it comes to these types of marches that are not covered by anyone. They aren't, and these photos are rarely shown except on social media. So, but there are some photos that I took that I am really proud of, that I think should be seen. And these are photos that are more abstract of the protests. And so they put long exposures and so forth, where one that I have that I'm making a huge print of for this next show is, unsurprisingly of a Palestinian flag, but you have to really look at it to know that it's a Palestinian flag. It's not going to be it's not going to be obvious to you because of the type of abstraction. It's almost painterly. And again, I don't mean that like my work is so great. I'm just describing it as it's more painterly than it is photography in a lot of ways. And
that's
so, and I think that we have to just, as an artist, I'm trying to tell the story in a different way. I don't want to take just a photo that I've taken before 100,000 times. I want to do something with it. I want people to really feel it. I want someone to look at something a little differently, because obviously nothing is working. when it comes to certain people. It just isn't working. Like, I just had a huge Facebook argument with, an old friend, and I don't even like Facebook, of course, who does, but this is the medium for a little bit older folk, right? Like myself. And so if I want to reach people for my Kickstarter, I have to go and talk to the people where they talk. So then they talk on Facebook. And I posted something, I posted my Zohran photos of the inauguration, and I'm proud of those and so forth. And someone comes on and starts saying like, I can't support anyone that says globalize the Intifada because they're coming after me. They want to kill me. They want my death. And I'm like, okay, well, besides the fact that he actually never said that, and he's always had to respond to that as as a trope, like, let's get over the facts here first. Like, you're actually comparing the idea of, words being more powerful than an actual genocide that's going on. Like, do we really need to go down this path? Like, you're my former lawyer. You're obviously way smarter than me in so many ways. In so many ways, you're an incredible intellect. And this is like, you're embarrassing yourself. Like, this is an embarrassment. But for some reason, these same people can't seem to get past that. And so what I want to do with my art, and it's whether it's success or fail is really up to the eye of the beholder, I suppose, at the moment. I don't know if I'm going to be changing my old friend's mind with, this abstract flag that I'm going to print.
Sure.
Obviously, it's probably not. But if I can raise some money for the PCRF or, or for another good cause and bring attention to it and stick it to someone else and make sure that they're uncomfortable, because that's
half the battle. Is existing as a person who disagrees. That's how you shift an Overton window. I don't beg for my followers to agree with me, and God forbid, I hope they don't. But I exist in a certain position to pull people to closer to where I am and moderate other positions I don't agree with. And that's, you never know the impact of it. And also this I'm sure you've heard this before, the Palestinian poem, I believe it's a Palestinian poem, being, in order for me to write poetry that isn't political, I must listen to the birds. In order to hear the birds, the warplanes must be silent. Have you ever heard that before? Yeah, that's always the poem I think of when I think of, like, I'm not a very artistic person. I don't do anything of particular artistic value. But when I think of this discussion of things being political, or art especially not being political, I think every person I do that does engage in some form of artistic form has that feeling of being like, well, what I'm doing isn't, like, I do it because I must. I do it because this is my passion. I do it because this is what I feel, and I'm expressing myself. This isn't about other people necessarily. Not to say that it's bad to be, but it's just not it's an experience and a formation of me. But then when it is deeply political, it is typically not because of what they're attempting to do, but the context in which it must be done, and what the thing that is genuine and true of themselves being expressed is in the context. And so, like, being genuinely free in the context of, like social contexts, limiting that is genuinely revolutionary in any case. And that's how I always see that. And that's the art that really, like, functionally sticks out to me. And that's why I always like these like, juxtapositions of two very normal things, right? Of, like, Arabs existing and then, like, New York existing. Those two things being in context of each other in certain things is wildly revolutionary because of the bigotry and disgust that we've seen. And showing that in certain ways is really beautiful. So, yeah. And I think, by the way, we're seeing this right now of protest art, right? With Venezuela and photojournalism being fundamental to telling the story right now. Very fundamental to telling the story right now. With independent photojournalists showing people in the street fighting back against the American intervention, kidnapping in Badaro, and then mainstream media showing entirely different narratives that are not accurate. So yeah, it's necessary and it's interesting. Those things aren't necessarily political, but they have an incredible political effect.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're touching on all the some really important things, and I think that poetry specifically is, and prose in itself is such a huge and important thing. Obviously, it's hard to, not obviously, some people it's easy to speak in public and so forth. Some people it's easy to formulate their thoughts and convey them. But to convey them in a way that is both so present and artful can have a really beautiful and deeper meaning. So one of the I don't recall, I should look this up before I got on this call, but there was one of Zohran's religious people that influence him around in his world that has spoken at a number of his different campaign events. Spoke again at his inauguration, and he spoke previously at a couple of other campaign events. And I wish I knew his name. He off the top of my head, but he's incredibly important person. He spoke with, he's a Muslim man, and he spoke with a rabbi, and he was surrounded by all the different religions. The major religions were surrounding him, and he gave the speech. He gave the speech, and his speech was powerful, and it had, like a lot of things in the inauguration, it just had, he had a beat to it. He had a rhyme to it. It had a propulsion to it. It had such an energy to it. And it also had such a humanity to it of like, this is our chance. This is a way that he's, that different people are being heard. And the way that he was able to convey that is so much different. And you need different as much as you need a variety. You need that variety, and you need someone who's attempting to aspire to do something that is more, that has this little sprinkle of sparkly dust on it, because you have to aspire for that, because that's what hopefully gets through to that 1% that really needs to hear it, that can be converted with that extra special sauce. And so when he or she or they do this, and they're able to convey it in that way, it's special. And that's why we look back on the major orators of our generations, and we say, wow, we can't believe that Malcolm X was able to deliver in this way, or we can't believe that MLK said this then, like in context, like what an amazing time to be able to deliver this. And so, I don't want to put the comparisons too heavily on those two figures, because it's impossible to live up to those expectations. But I will say that I think the aspiration is for me, the aspiration is a lot about what the art is. Art is the process. That I can hang something on a wall. Okay, anyone can hang something on a wall. Like, it's the process of getting there. It's like what goes into that. And that's why you mentioned the context of it. Like, why was it shot? How was it shot? Well, I was in that moment with 5,000 other people, marching for the 5th mile, walking up Park Avenue as we close down Park Avenue so that they can make a statement to the billionaires in New York that this was not going to stand. That's what they decided to do that day, and that's what I decided to capture. And I feel so fortunate to be able to have been in that moment, to try and convey that in a different way. Like, to me, that's special. And so the humanity, to me, again, this is my description of art, is the humanity. Whether it's someone else's, is their choice.
Well, I mean, if I think back on the art, once again, I'm a fan of art. I don't produce very much, but I do think, when I think back about the art that like I stick in and really emotionally affects me, and like I remember always, it will always come back to kind of 3 examples being very, very famous examples. One of the Christians protecting the Muslims, and vice versa, praying during the Arab Spring. There are some beautiful shots of that out of Cairo and Alexandria, where you can see the mobs around them of police and other such not feds literally, but trying to stop this and trying to interrupt this in their free zones. That's beautiful. And then the pictures and specific iconography of lesbians helping gay men during the AIDS epidemic, the march that they led, etc. And then, of course, the iconography that came out of the AIDS epidemic, the upside down pink triangle. And none of those things are like I can appreciate the kind of creation of it, what it looks like visually and aesthetically, but the powerful thing of it is never that. The powerful thing of that is the message that it's sending and the beauty that it portrays with like the iconography of it. Like specifically the pink triangle. The way that pink triangle has also been used to represent like liberation in Palestine, and there are some remixes of that I really, really appreciate. The context of that's beautiful because of the message and the clever, effective way that it's telling that message, and like things being said in very interesting, clever ways. So yeah, I think I don't know. I think the political content of art is something that's generally underrated. I don't know if actually people consider this when they're engaged in politics. Not enough.
Well,
not enough
I mean,
in public discourse. I guess there are circles in private. Yeah.
Well, I mean, within the organizational constructs, they do. At least here they do. I'm sure they do all over, but there's some great groups, that are just artists that artists against, and they'll artists against
Yeah.
apartheid, artists against all of these different groups that are literally making the signs and so forth, designing the different emblems that might do this. And ACT UP, who I believe came up with the triangle, the
Yes.
pink
Yes.
triangle, such an important group. And I am pleased to have covered even more recent actions by them. One of the first things that I remember covering in terms of Palestine specifically, they organized a few of they've done many, but I covered a couple of what I think are earlier ones. One where they had a bunch of theater actors, professional theater actors, who are Jews primarily from New York here. And they performed different scripts from the Freedom Theater in Palestine, right in Astor Place on 8th Street and Broadway, approximately, is where Astor Place is, somewhat downtown here. But they did it at candlelight vigil, and it was just a absolutely beautiful and heartbreaking
Yeah.
thing to witness. And my job, as both a photojournalist and theoretically an artist, in this case, it's more of documenting versus like trying to make some art over it, of it, though they're both interrelated. They're not always the same. I'm trying to just convey what the emotion of the moment. And just thinking back to it, I'm getting emotional because it was that powerful. Like you can use these words and you can say, the actors, of course, if you're a good actor, it helps. But if you could say these words, when you say them passionately and you say them with conviction, and this is, the words are abstract in some ways, though they might say, like, they might talk about life and the problems of the day, for sure, describing that. But, they're an abstract. It's not talking about what's happening literally that day. It's talking about a play that was written during a certain time. It's based on reality, but it's not, it may not be. And they're just enacting it. And it is still such an important thing to have that voice, because that's part of freedom of speech too, as we've witnessed, because they'll shut that down too. They'll shut down just a play that is discussing this.
Yeah.
They'll shut down plays about environment. They'll do that too. It's incredible. So I guess, there's a lot to talk about in terms of like how art affects, how politics and art are together, and some are more obvious and some are less so.
Yeah.
And I think figuring that out to me is definitely the balance is there. What I am taking with this Kickstarter for this new book, it's called False Flags right now.
Yeah.
Is
Tell me about that. Yeah, I want to get there because we'll be wrapping up in 5 or so minutes.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
let's talk
Well,
about
then
your
I'm glad that
Kickstarter.
I
Let's
brought it
plug
up.
and plug. Yeah.
Well, but it really does fall into this conversation
Absolutely.
very easily. It's it's not going to be so much like this art book, which is a photo memoir of my last 10 years of deeply intense photographic study. And that it's going to show, only resonant, or would only be resonant to people following the Palestine issue. It's a broad scope of photos that I wanted to somehow show without it being categorized. And a lot of photo art books are categorized by, here's a study of green jars, and then you have like 20 pages of green jars. Here you have 50 portraits of people. And here you have, 50 action shots, and here's sports. And what I've done a lot of different, I'm lucky to have photographed a lot of different art and a lot of different movements. I consider myself a social movement photographer in some ways, and an abstract art photographer in others. And so how can I show all this without it being so that the book is an object of art, so that the whole concept is an artistic one? And that's why we are working on False Flags as one. And what I'm trying to do is be able to put photo next to photo and see how they interact with each other.
Yeah, and can I ask, what's the inspo for the name, False Flags?
Well, obviously there's a lot of usages for false flags these days.
Well, of course.
So, the political component of it is important, but it's really the politics within the discussion of the photos.
Sure.
And how one photo, a photo says, 1,000 words, right? It tells it that. But if you put another photo next to it, that choice of what photo you choose to put next to it changes what words come out, perhaps, of there's a dialogue between the images. And so sometimes the images will work together. They might help tell a story together, or they might sabotage each other. And it might totally blow up what your concept of what one photo might have meant by having a totally different type of photo juxtaposed next to it.
Sure.
And so the idea of false flags is to play with that and see what that comes up with. And again, part of that process is making it. So I've been choosing and working on photos for the book for the last 6 months. I've been editing photos every day for 6 months, trying to pick out the best ones that I think could work. And then I'll turn it over to a colleague that will help me organize it. And I have another colleague who's bringing in a different type of recording that she does, which she is my collaborator. Her name's Nicole Blackman, and she's a poet and auteur. And what she does is she records overheard conversation bits physically on paper. So out of context thoughts is what she's hearing. And she quickly writes them down and is able to then, in essence, rip the piece of paper off and give it to me. And I get to look at it. And then we discuss how those words work with the photos. So here she has just a bit of a conversation. She might have not heard anything else, but she's heard a little bit of context, or no context, and a little bit, and she writes it down. And how does that play in? So we're basically trying to figure out how all of these different recordings, whether it be written word recordings of overheard context, out of context statements, and photos, will play together. Will they play nicely or not? And that's as simple as it is. The idea of the of what how difficult this will be, or the context for me is for me to come up with really my artistic statement, and the big challenge is going to be to write my story of coming from the world of anti-Zionism from Zionism to anti-Zionism, and making that a big part of it. And the reason why I'm doing that and going out on a limb, if you will, a bit to do that, is because I have nothing to lose. Like, people have already lost their lives, and we've watched them, and I don't have anything left to lose. Like, there's nothing that you can do to me that is any worse that's already happening right now. And I feel like every Jew that has an opportunity to speak out in one way or another about this in this way needs to. And I've gotten into trouble for that and so forth. But
we've all gotten into some amount of trouble. I've been fine, but I hope you have had the best. But it is horrible, and people have had their lives ruined. I mean, like, this shit's nasty. I mean, with every new decolonial struggle that comes, there are the curse of being a leftist is being right too early, and people don't like when you're right too early. So absolutely.
It's true.
It's very real. It's very real. And the definition of being a liberal is being against every war but the current one, which is fantastic.
Well, I mean, there are lots of examples, and I'm by no means am I a victim at all in this. I am taking full ownership. I'm going this direction because I've seen people on other photographers that I work with daily on this issue or on other issues that we've covered together, from Jewish Voices for Peace, If Not Now, Actions, etc., and just other basic within our lifetime actions as well, where these people have put their literal lives on the line. I have a photographer friend who was arrested, and their camera was taken away. Another photographer, same thing. They were arrested for what? For documenting.
Oh God, that is horrible.
And so, so I feel compelled, like, not to get arrested or something like that. Like, I have to do that, but that's not the. If that happens, that happens. But the main point is that, like, I am a person of privilege that have not had to experience the issues, and I want to do what I can. If it helps one person, it helps two people, that would be amazing. But I want to be able to say, like, I left it all out there when it's all done. I let people know they know where I stood. I want people to know that.
Well, that is fantastic. I think that's a great place to end it. If you want to give your final plug for your book on Kickstarter, that would be great, and then we can call it a wrap for the episode. But I really appreciate you coming on, Daniel. I appreciate it. This has been a good conversation. It's good vibes, and thank you so much for hitting me up to talk about this.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. That before, so forgive me. So yeah, I'm Daniel Efram. I have a book called False Flags that's being kickstarted right now. I hope you'll check out the link that supposedly will be below. And thanks for listening.